Color grading is important, both in filmmaking and photography, because it helps us conveying emotions and feelings to people watching our stuff. And I get asked almost daily how I color grade my so I thought the best way of approaching this is to actually make a video and explain to you my whole process. So let's dive into it. My name is Luca, I'm a photographer and content creator, and I try to make videos to inspire others and share my knowledge because I believe that sharing is caring. So everything I know will be out for display here in these videos. So make sure you hit that follow button. The first step to color grading before you even open any program is understanding your style. And the best way of doing so is by picking up your favorite films or your favorite photographers and look at their work. That's what I do every single time I'm starting a new job or I'm looking for a new inspiration and I want a fresh new point of view on things. So when I color grade my stuff, because my taste is strongly dependent on film photography and 35 and 65mm films, I ask myself, how can I make this look like film? I will show you all the plugins and my entire workflow, both for my images and for my videos. But I have to tell you, some of the tools I will be using are paid, and they were given to me by Dehancer. That doesn't mean that this video is sponsored, because in reality I was using Dehancer tools way before making this video and way before reaching out to them. The only reason I reached out to them is because I asked them to give me access to the tools I didn't have from them to make this video more comprehensive. And they kindly gave me access to them, and they even gave me a discount code that I can share with you. If by the end of this video you decide that you want to give them a try, this is the discount code, save some money. Now, let's start. When it comes to video editing, you probably use Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve. I mostly use DaVinci because I think the UI is a lot more intuitive and it helps me breaking down all the different parts of editing a video in the smartest way possible. That doesn't mean the Premiere is bad or you can't achieve filmic analog looks. I'm going to use the noobiest approach possible to color grading, which means I'm going to be using one node. So I'm on the color grade section and I'm just gonna slide this into my clip. The first thing we need to do is we need to select the right source. This clip has not been converted to Rec 709 already, meaning that we cannot have Rec 709 as a source, but we need to select the correct thing. This clip was shot on iPhone in Apple Log in Sicily, so we're gonna go and choose camera, vendor Apple, and now Dehancer has understood automatically that this is Apple Log, and it actually has already applied a film preset to it. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to choose the film I like. Now, if you don't like them, you can browse them and choose the one you like the most. In my case, I know I want this clip to be color gold 200. So once that is selected, I'm just gonna correct the exposure a tiny bit, as it's a tiny bit underexposed. That was my fault. And I'm gonna warm the image up. We have already selected the film ourselves before. And just to let you know, once you select a film, you're also applying automatic effects to this. As you can go down here, you can see film grain has already been enabled. If you like to make your grade without seeing grain, you can tick this off. I like to keep it on because I like to know how my grade will look once it's done. And I know I'm going to apply grain at a certain point. Now, when it comes to film developer, I like to take it on because that's what I usually use to check my contrast and my saturation, meaning that I always add a tiny bit of contrast to get an extra punch to my image. And then if I want to control my saturation, in my case I like very saturated images, so I'm gonna actually slide my saturation quite a bit to the right. That's around where I'm happy with it. I rarely use film compression unless I'm shooting very dark scenes. The reason I don't like it is because I like my whites and my black to be very punchy, and in this specific case I don't feel there's any blacks that needs to be recovered, and I want the white part of these boats to actually attract the attention. And as you can see, if I activate the film compression, I'm gonna lose that, so I'm not gonna touch that. Because I have nothing to be recovered from the blacks, as we can see here in the curves, I don't need to expand anything, but if that ever comes to you, there you go, you can just do everything there. When it comes to print, I like to leave it as linear, but I know that a lot of professional colorists actually like to change this and play around with this. What I actually do, even though I leave it on linear, I still like to toggle the tonal contrast, and usually I slide it 1 or 2 points to the right to get an extra kick. Then I try not to touch the color density. The reason I don't is because I have already touched that on the color boost on the film developer, and I like to control it in just one place, because if I ever have to go back and tweak it in the future, I don't want to go down and have to check for saturation in 2 different sliders. Where I actually spend the majority of my time is the color head. The reason for this is because this is actually where I get to decide the exact look of my image, and for some reason I always feel like my images are never warm enough. So what I actually do, I go on the color head and I always end up moving my sliders towards a warmer image. Just to let you know, I never gang the sliders because I always want to work on them individually. So I'm gonna move the yellow blue towards the yellow, and then I want my image to be a tiny bit more magenta. You can see here it's warming up a lot on the rocks, but I actually like it because I know what type of image I'm looking for, and then I'm gonna move the reds a bit towards the red. And now I feel like we're getting that nostalgic analog look. I just want to show you guys how much has changed. This is the image 5 minutes ago. And this is how the image looks now. It has already gone a dramatic way in 5 minutes. Now, we have film grain here. It's currently set on 35mm ISO 250. I like the most 35mm ISO 50. There's a bunch of presets you can choose from, or you can make your own grain preset. I'll be honest, I've never used a custom one. So I'm just gonna go with 35mm ISO 50 and I'm probably gonna bump the amount a tiny bit. Now, when it comes to bloom, I'm gonna toggle that on, and I like to toggle that at the same time as when I toggle halation, because I feel like these two effects actually go together. So I want to know exactly how they look. I think this image has a lot of bloom right now. The reason is because a lot of this area is white and that makes a lot of bloom. So I'm gonna bring the bloom down and I'm gonna bring the halation down a bit. Obviously, bloom and halation still have presets, just like grain. So make sure you choose the ones you like. I tend to have film damage always on, and the majority of the time I just leave it on 35mm Super 35 because it does an amazing job. If you want to use overscan, you can just activate it and it's pretty straightforward. You get to choose what gate type you want. Let's say you want 8mm. You can obviously choose if it's sharp, rounded. You can also make it static or non-static. If you want to, you can choose the orientation, and then you can remove or make negative or positive the perforation. In this case, I would probably take it off. Now, the reason I usually don't use overscan on the single clip is because once I'm done coloring all the clips, I tend to make a separate composition and then I apply overscan at the end. So in this specific case, I'm taking it off. Now, the last thing I would do if I were you is I would actually go on quality and click high slow. This obviously just gives you a higher quality out. Now, if I have to look at the image, what I would say is that it's probably lacking a tiny bit of contrast. That means that I can just go up and I can just boost my contrast a tiny bit. Now, in 6 minutes of editing, we brought a log image that looked like this to an image that looked like this. What if you don't have Dehancer? I told you I was gonna show you the free version. Well, the one that I think is worth noting is the Film Look Creator. This tool is available in the DaVinci Studio version, which is the paid version of the program, and it's completely free. But I'll be honest with you, I really don't think it can compete with Dehancer, but it does work. And let me explain to you why I think it doesn't really work the way we intended to work. First of all, the effect simulation is worse than Dehancer. That means that halation, bloom, and grain can't really compete. The thing is, Dehancer makes an incredible work at these things, and it's very hard to beat. The second thing is that Film Look Creator doesn't really emulate famous films. It allows you to create your own look, but that means that it's way more time consuming and hard to use. It doesn't have a Rec 709 conversion, so you need to do all the conversion before and then you need to use the Film Look Creator. It is a bit more of an iffy workflow, mostly if you, like me, are not that familiar with color grading yourself. The last thing is that this is only available in the studio version of the program. That means that you have to pay 349 euros to get the studio version of DaVinci, and then you can use Film Look Creator. Dehancer cost 499, but you can get my 10% discount. So in reality, they end up kind of equaling themselves in price, but Dehancer ends up being a far stronger tool, which will save you a lot more time. So the truth is, if you don't have already the DaVinci Studio version, I probably would go with Dehancer. But if you have the studio version or you want to give the studio version a try, I will actually link you guys to a video which is made by a pro colorist, which is just far better than me at explaining how the Film Look Creator works. So you'll find that linked in the description. Give it a look. When it comes to photographer, being the core part of my business as a photographer, I feel a lot more entitled to speak. So let me show you how I color grade all my images and how I make sure I'm consistent between my images and my videos. You will need either Lightroom or Capture One. And this is an extra, but if you have Photoshop, that would really help. I will show you how I do it in Capture One because that's what I use daily, mostly because I usually shoot tethered, and I think the Capture One handles my files a lot better. But if you have Lightroom, it works the same exact way. So let's get into it. Now, if you don't have Dehancer, I did make 15 free presets for Lightroom and Photoshop that you can get. Just click the link in bio. They're completely free, they're completely plug and play. That means that you just install them and they're gonna work. And you can always tweak them. And if you don't have Lightroom but you do have Photoshop, you can use them in Photoshop. You just need to open Camera Raw and Camera Raw Export. That's great. The reason I use Capture One is very simple. And there's two ways we can use Dehancer in Capture One and Lightroom and also in Photoshop. But in reality, there's only one. Let me explain. Obviously, I can open one image in Capture One and click on Edit with Dehancer Lightroom plugin. Yes, the plugin is the same for Lightroom and Capture One. But there's a reason why you shouldn't do it. Now if I click on it, it's going to create a TIFF file that's a copy of my image, and I can apply color grade to it, which is great. Now let's say that this is the color grade I like. And this is the same in Lightroom, by the way. Great. So the color grade has now been applied on this TIFF file that has been created, and the TIFF file is here. But what if this is not exactly the color grade I want? There is no way I can go back to this. And yes, Dehancer is quite good, so they do have a last edit version, but this is not enough for me to be able to edit or tweak the colors exactly how I want. And just to be clear, this is not Dehancer's fault. So let me show you how I would do it in order to be able to change the color grading of my images whenever I want in the future. So I'm gonna remove this image because this, in my opinion, is the wrong way of doing it. I'm just gonna click here and I'm gonna say edit with Adobe Photoshop instead of Dehancer. I'm gonna click OK, and this is going to create a variant that is being opened in Photoshop. As you can see, it already appeared down there in Capture One. Now I have this image in Photoshop. I can duplicate that layer. I'm gonna right click on it and convert it to a smart object. Now if I go on filter up here and I click on Dehancer, this is exactly the same filter that opened up before in Capture One, or the same exact filter that would open in Lightroom. Let's say that this is the color grading we like. I'm gonna click Command S and save this TIFF file. I'm gonna wait for it to save, and once it's saved, I'm gonna close it. Now I'm no longer in control of that image, and that image looks exactly the same as it would look before. But if I instead open this one on Photoshop, this image is now going to be completely editable. The reason this is editable is because it had a separate layer which was a smart object with a filter applied to it, and that gives us full control of that image. So I'm actually gonna click on the Dehancer, double click on it, and there we are. Now we can just edit this image once again. I actually really like the Adox Color Implosion 100 as a starting point for this image. To get a better idea of what I'm doing, I'm just gonna toggle the film grain up. Let's try to compensate for the exposure a tiny bit because the image is a bit dark. Now I'm gonna toggle on the film developer, but I don't think this image needs any more contrast. What I think it needs is a color boost, because the reds in the peppers and the yellow is all a bit desaturated for my taste. So this is the color boost I needed. Might even go stronger actually. Now let's go on film compression. I don't necessarily think this image needs film compression, because if we turn film compression on, as you can see, we lose all those specular highlights on the eyes, which we want. Or at least I want in this case. Expansion is a pretty big thing for this image, as you can see, because the white have been expanded quite a bit. So actually I'm gonna expand them even more just to get that extra kick there on the eyes. So just to show you guys, this is the before and this is after. If you want to see how the image looked before, you just need to click on the eye, and this is great to show you the before and after your grading of the image. Now the print is currently on. As I said on videos, I usually keep it on linear, so I want to be true to myself and do the same to my images. I'm just gonna bring it back to linear, and I'm actually gonna try and bring the exposure down a bit, but it was to minus 0.97 before, so and I think that's a bit excessive. We're gonna keep at minus 0.76, sorry. Now we need some extra contrast because we've been taking that off. So we can add that back, that's lovely. And now we can go on the color head and we can work our way. So I want to remove some of the blue from the backdrop mostly, and then I want all my image to feel a bit more red. Okay, now I'm kind of happy with the colors of the image. This is the before, this is where we are at now. I'm gonna toggle off the halation and I'm gonna toggle off blue. Now everything we're left with is we need to work on the effects. So let's go back on film grain and we're gonna toggle it on. Grain for my type of photography is a very big thing. Let's go and select 35mm ISO 50, which is the grain I like to always start with, to see see what I'm doing better, I'm just gonna click on 101, which gives me a full-size preview of my image. Okay, I actually think this image could have more grain. So I'm actually gonna go custom on this. I'm gonna make my grain bigger, that's for sure. I don't necessarily think I need more of it, and I want my grain to be completely monochrome, so I'm just taking all the color away from it. And I'm just gonna make the size even bigger. Now, let's turn halation on. You can always put it in mask mode. If you put it in mask mode, you can actually see where halation is being applied to. That's lovely. Now I know that halation is there mostly on the eyes part, which is exactly what I want, and I'm quite happy with it. In this specific image, I need to be very careful with bloom because I don't want this bloom effect here on the eyes because it looks like we edited the image poorly. So I'm gonna bring the highlights down and the source limiter down as well. Now I'm just gonna toggle film damage on, and I'm gonna bring the scale of everything down, and I'm gonna make sure that the amount is actually very low because I don't like when my images look too dirty. So I'm gonna make sure that everything is small and barely visible. Now, just like videos, we have overscan. Now you see, even overscan is exactly the same, and that's something I really like about Dehancer. It's the fact that it really is the same exact piece of software, just molded differently for different uses. We're gonna keep the vignette on, and now that I see the image, I actually think that it could use some extra contrast. So I'm gonna bring in some extra contrast there, and I might even give it a tiny bit of an extra color boost. Now I want to show you something I was very skeptical about, and this is the mobile Dehancer app. Reason I'm showing you this is because when I reached out to them, they asked me if I was interested in showing them the mobile app. Truth is, that's the only app from them that I did not use before making this video. Obviously I said yes, partially because I was curious, partially because I struggled to find file editing softwares great. These softwares I tried before were bad. And usually when I take images with my iPhone, I always end up using them as memories because I always carry my camera with me. I wanted to see if I could be proven wrong. Oh boy, I was wrong. The first thing I have to say is this app has every single functionality that the desktop app has. That's something that I wasn't expecting from my mobile app. It even has the same exactly UI. You get to choose your preset if you want to have a preset, or you can create your own look starting from a film. In this case, I decided to use a preset, and I started with the CineStill 50D. Now everything I did from there is I added some contrast because I shot this image on a very hazy day, and then I added some grain and corrected the temperature of the image because the image was very blue. And then I hit export. That's everything I did, and this is the before and this is the after. I think the time it took me to edit this image is no longer than 1 minute 50 seconds. As much as I would like to give you free alternatives to this, I don't think there's any free alternative or a paid alternative to this app if you edit your images on mobile. Because I've never tried a single app on my iPhone even come close to this. That's why I speak so highly of it, even though I've been using this for a week now. So if you're looking for a mobile alternative because you don't have a PC or you shoot your images on an iPhone, think Dehancer Mobile. So if you reach this part of the video, you now probably have a very good idea of how I color grade everything I do. Let it be videos, let it be images. And now I try to be as consistent as possible. I really hope this video helped you, and if there's any other questions you want to make, please feel free to write them down, and I will try my best to answer all of you. Peace.